Hello and welcome, dear friends. My name is Dylan McCone, and while you may not have expected it, this video is actually part of an honors project for the University of Washington German Honors Program. I've been working on this project for the last 10 weeks, subjecting myself to soundtracks that used to give me nightmares as a child. The idea for this project started off as a joke, but my friends Triple Dog dared me to do it, and I'm legally not allowed to tell them no. In this video essay, I will be exploring how music is used to motivate listeners. In video games, encouraging and directing players efficiently is vital, otherwise they're just going to put down the controller. So how do we keep gamers playing? Timers and countdowns are key elements for forcing gamers to perform some task and motivate them to do so quickly. It introduces the stress of a deadline. But how do video games curate that stress? I'll be focusing on how music that accompanies timers is used in video games to stress out and thus motivate players. I'll do this through a series of examples, deconstructing how each game uses the music, efficiently or otherwise, to motivate and direct players towards their end goals. I chose video games as a medium because they are uniquely interactive and dynamic. The impact music has on the tone of a scene is super fascinating to me, but the way music is incorporated in gaming is entirely distinct from movies. Movies are pre-planned, and so the flow and timing are completely controlled. But players of video games move dynamically, and so the programmers can't make assumptions about where they are, what they're doing, or for how long. This makes setting the tone and directing the player incredibly important and difficult to do. I'm very curious to discover how various game developers approach this issue of free will and use music to direct players. Now, you should listen to what I have to say because I watched the original 1998 Bill Nye episode on the science of music, and my dad used to be a drummer when I was a baby, so I kind of know what I'm doing. I did also do a little bit of legitimate academic research, which I'll be referencing too, but mainly it's the Bill Nye. The other preliminary research that I'm referring to involves compiling a ton of examples of timers in video games that have distinct music. To do this, I reached out on social media and many Discords and Reddits, and I did a lot of Googling. Simultaneously, I did some digging through academic papers, researching the cognitive impact of music on people, what makes music scary or inspiring, and the technical side of how music is written. I learned how to determine the meter of a song, what that means for the rhythm and pace, and how rhythm impacts our experience and reaction to the music. Key notes: I am not a musician, I am not a game developer, and I am not going to teach you the idiosyncrasies of rhyme and meter. My goal with this is just to complain and make people think about how music functions as ambient stimuli while playing a fundamental role in our experiences. Another important caveat that I wanted to note: I did not include death animation in my research. It is the lead-up that I am interested in. The appeal of video games is about how they satisfy basic psychological needs for competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Basically, people want to get good. It's a mix of cathartic relief, projecting onto unfamiliar characters and situations, and getting to do things we ourselves can't or won't do. It's the same reason we like movies and music on the whole. It creates a semi-artificial, semi-organic experience that we can inhabit temporarily. The more efficiently we are submerged into this world, the better the game is. Countdowns and timers are well-established tools for creating a sense of urgency, and that urgency induces stress in us to inspire motivation. This is a perfectly normal survival instinct. Early bird gets the worm and all that. Timers are commonly used UI or user interface tactics as well. An example is showing not just the day a sale will end, but the exact time, which creates even more urgency. The use of ascending versus descending timers also plays a big role. The use of descending timers shows a marked increase in motivation, though the increase in stress and worry as a result of that timer takes up valuable RAM in our brains, which can hurt the actual quality of our work. Gamification pulls from common gaming elements to improve interaction quality and efficiency. Timers as a means of motivation are particularly common. Studies in this field show the presence of a timer decreases the completion time at the expense of better solutions. And a combination of factors, like a timer and live leaderboards, significantly decrease completion time and improve quality of solutions. In sum, we are finding that the presence of descending timers in any format creates a sense of urgency, which increases motivation. This motivation leads to faster completion times, often by sacrificing quality. This may not be news to us, but it is vital for understanding why we use timers and the goals we aim to achieve with them. So yeah, timers are great. That's why games use them. But what about that music though? Why not just have some floating numbers or a timer in the corner? Video games are still fun and we can still be motivated even when our speakers are broken or our mom yells at us to turn that racket down. But sound has plenty of added benefits for activating a stress response. We have to acknowledge that vision dominates video games. Accessibility features have come a long way in the last few years, but the sad truth is that developers heavily rely on visual cues to tell their story. Over half of our cortex is dedicated to visual stimuli, but we can actually respond to sound stimuli faster than visual. Light travels faster than sound, sure, but all the inner workings of our brain require visual stimuli to take multiple steps, through the retina to the optic nerve, the primary visual cortex, and then that can be sent out to the rest of our higher brain to reconcile what we're seeing with whatever object you're looking at. Sound is referred to then as a mechanical and not a chemical sense because of how our sensory nerves are wired. Humans can respond to audible stimuli in less than a millionth of a second, faster than thought, since the signal has to travel through far fewer neurons to prompt action. This is the startle reflex, why a booming crash can make us jump out of our seat before we even realize that there was a sound. Seth Horowitz argues that sound is a universal sense because of its speed. What makes music motivational, though? There are plenty of methods to prompt users, a particularly common one being to scare them into action. Key elements of spooky music would be jumps in frequency, extending beyond normal human capabilities and range, non-standard harmonies and dissonance, and chaotic sound. Slow pulsating rhythms and progressively sped up tones build up stress as the listener awaits some resolution. Purposely drawing out that resolution or prohibiting it can cause even more stress and discomfort. These tactics are heavily used in movie soundtracks and, yes, video games. For this project, I have separated my case studies into two main categories based on their method of motivation: the soothing and the anxiety inducing. When I said video game timers, Jeopardy is probably the first thing that came to mind, and honestly, it's okay. Jeopardy isn't originally a video game, but we have to give it props for being without a doubt the #1 musical timer. The theme song for Jeopardy, and Wheel of Fortune go figure, was written by Merv Griffin. It's titled Think, and it won the Best Game Show theme in 2009 Game Show Awards. Think was originally a lullaby written in under a minute to help Griffin's 5-year-old son fall asleep, which explains why the music is so calm and peaceful. Think is played during Final Jeopardy and is exactly 30 seconds long, which is the amount of time contestants have to answer. While the music itself isn't spooky or foreboding, it doesn't use fear to stress out, the song is so well known that contestants can tell how much time is left based on what part of the song is playing. Honestly, I probably don't even need to be playing it right now. There aren't many examples of musical timers that can entirely replace a numerical countdown, especially those that don't rely on progressively speeding up the music until it's a single drawn-out note. Some of the power of Think is its repetitiveness. The first and last half are nearly identical in rhythm, but use different instruments and pitch. The song is also split in half by a unique bridge. At 15 seconds, the halfway point, horns take over at a slightly higher pitch but with the same rhythm. Each half ends with a descending pitch of 7 notes that resolves into a new verse, either the bridge or the concluding drum beat. This consistent pattern makes the tune predictable. In addition to leveraging this pattern, a ticking clock persists throughout the whole song. Let's listen. And then here are the last 5 seconds. The final second, or the 0th second, if such a thing exists, also utilizes this repetitiveness to its advantage. Firstly, the last 2 notes are baritone drum beats that decrease in pitch. They follow the descending pitch in the relative rhythm of the previous notes, so it's not jarring, but it does end in a soft resolution. The most interesting thing is how the last 5 seconds are made to feel even longer using the music, giving gamers just the perception of having a smidge of wiggle room to finish writing. This is because the first verse, the 20 to 15 second mark, is actually faster. In the final 5 seconds, the last 2 notes of the iconic 7-note series are drawn out. Since we have both versions in our mind, the most recent being the first half of the song, the longer one in the moment feels even longer, which can be incredibly effective for squeezing out that last bit of motivation of our players. This next case study is the only reason I was able to get through editing this video. I will be looking at the game-based learning platform Kahoot. For those who haven't experienced the joy of Kahoot, just listen. People love this song. YouTube and SoundCloud has a vast number of Kahoot music remixes and re-uploads. The 10-hour Kahoot music video on YouTube has an upward of 13 million views. A study on the impact of Kahoot in classrooms found that the use of audio and music in Kahoot had a significant positive impact on classroom dynamics, which resulted in an improved atmosphere for oral questions and discussion in class. So clearly the music is working, but what about it? The thing about the Kahoot music is that it doesn't actually feel like a countdown. The music is repetitive and consistent enough to be predictable, but the music is made to loop for variable durations. There isn't a precise end to the song we are waiting for, no beeping of an alarm clock or the obvious transitions like a decreasing volume. People seem to find it equal parts bubbly and relaxing. The power of Kahoot music in particular is that it's upbeat, happy music that can entertain and simultaneously function as background music. Kahoot is not made to perform complex tasks in short periods, and the goal is to answer as quickly as you can. The Kahoot timer is a limit, not a goal. For this reason, the motivation primarily comes from the competition with peers, as faster answers result in higher scores. Kahoot runs into the key issue of gaming. The writers don't know how long it's going to take for players to complete their task, and thus can't create a piece that perfectly conforms to the action. Kahoot's choice in the face of this dilemma is to make pleasant background music that emphasizes engagement over inspiring speed. Now it's time to transition into our next case study. We will be looking at the 8-bit adventure game Minit. Timers take on much more meaning in the game of Minit because the basic premise is that your character is living in a time loop lasting only 60 seconds. The timer is now a gameplay and narrative element. Gameplay is using each interval to learn more about the environment and optimize specific timelines to reach a specific goal. Since gamers have only a minute to perform their task and must use efficient time management, timekeeping is the name of the game, literally. Minit is an 8-bit action-adventure game, and the music reflects that. I'm going to be talking about the full soundtrack because literally every second of the game is representative of a countdown. The music is upbeat and fast, perfect for an adventure game that emphasizes speed. The speech is also a very fast version of the typical 8-beat speech bubbles. They kind of have to be since we don't want to waste time waiting for NPCs to finish a sentence. An interesting element is that music persists between time loops. However, the last 10 seconds of a time loop does distinguish itself. The whole game there is a small countdown from 60 in the top left corner, which starts flashing black and white with a tick mark every second that sounds like a stereotypical clock. Tick marks, as I am calling them, a single note emitted per second elapsed, are common and beneficial for their simplicity. It's like a metronome, keeping rhythm and marking the passage of time. The motivation comes from the reminder that time is passing, and subconsciously establishing a rhythm to the player's actions. It takes 1 tick mark to jump between these platforms, 2 tick marks across this enemy, etc. At 3 seconds, this tick is layered with a deep, rhythmic pulse reminiscent of a heartbeat. When the player dies at 0 seconds, they are sent off to the sound of coughing. Low-tone pulsing to emulate a heartbeat is maybe not the oldest trick in the book, but definitely a oldie but a goodie. It's a visceral reminder that time is running out. You can't stop it, and you are going to die. In the last few seconds, it's a race to finish your task, dreading the stupid mistakes you made the past minute and already planning for how the next loop will be perfect. Now that I have successfully lulled you into a false sense of security, let's move on from the soothing examples to the anxiety-inducing. These are the ones that use fear and stress to motivate gamers. To start off this terrible new chapter in our life, let's look at my prime childhood nightmare fodder, It. It's really shocking to me how no one seems to know about the It games anymore. I'm starting to believe that it was just a fever dream I had as a child, and that's why it horrified me so much. It is an interactive film series. It's basically just Trivial Pursuit, but if you throw out those pesky history questions. All the questions are about pop culture and films and whatnot. The game comes with a standard board that you move around by answering questions correctly, but the key distinction was the DVD that always fell out when organizing our game closet and barely functions after 4 plays. The DVD contained its own set of questions, clips of film that players had to identify the source of, a Wheel of Fortune knockoff where you have to guess the movie title from missing letters, and absolutely terrifying music. There have been hundreds of themed It games, from Harry Potter to HBO to Glee, but none worse than the original. I suppose they got enough complaints. I made this entire project so I could talk about the original 2003 DVD movie game version that I dug out of my closet. The countdown from the start of this video is responsible for countless childhood nightmares. I would seriously leave the room during certain segments of this game to avoid hearing it. Some of the theme versions have normal countdowns like Disney's, but the 2 I'm going to talk about are just the worst. Here's version 1.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
And the original 2003 DVD movie game version. Why is this so scary? Honestly, I know it's a bit of a personal belief, but let's talk logistics. For their newer edition, we have this baritone countdown, backed by a consistent beeping that keeps time reminiscent of a submarine. Am I afraid of submarines? No. Do ominous, vaguely echoing countdowns scare me? Absolutely. The voice sounding semi-robotic doesn't help either. But the countdown wasn't what set me to bed early. It was the simple countdown from the original, no speech. I could do a whole other video on the visuals, the spinning lights and layering opaque scaled-up numbers that spin off the page. The transition from decrementing every 5 seconds to every second at 10 artificially speeds up perception of time. The sudden awareness of each individual second makes things all the more pressing. But how do I describe the ethereal, echoing, and robotic atmosphere this evokes? Well, I struggle to find anything better than the terms otherworldly. What really gets my heart racing is the last 6 seconds, where each second is accompanied by one of these. It's like an electronic whoosh. The closest equivalent I can find is the whooshing of air past your ears through an open car window, driving through tunnels late at night. The change in pressure and wind as you enter a tunnel at 60 miles an hour and exiting the tunnel into free air, or the audio equivalent of sunlight flashing as you speed past tall trees. I think I have to step back for this one. I don't know what it is, but this uncanny countdown scares me into wrong answers. For me, a very ineffective timer. For this case study, I am looking specifically at the 1994 Game Boy version of Donkey Kong, originally in the arcades. An undisclosed individual introduced me to this game when I told her about this project, and after half an hour of trying to figure out which childhood game she was talking about, I found this clip on YouTube. The song is aptly named Hurry Up. I sure do love the internet's endless archive of terror. time, down at the 30-second mark, the music switches up and progressively increases in speed. The transition to it increases in speed through 4 repeated phrases of 4 notes. The countdown takes original music and speeds it up. At 15 seconds, the repeated 4 phrases happen again and adds an additional, much higher pitch layer. It also increases in speed yet again. The whole thing increases in speed, but this layer is uniquely fast. A single note is repeated so quickly that it almost sounds like it's held constant for about a second. The time period between each pace change decreases, and so each consecutive tick gets even faster. The original music being 8-bit was already a bit funky and otherworldly. This whole outro is extending past human abilities by making the Game Boy scream at you. This is a classic example of how progressively increasing pitch and pace can indicate running out of time and motivate players to speed up. Oh, the infamous water levels. Digital water has been incurring hate and childhood tantrums since the beginning of time, and while Mario may have started it all, Sonic takes the fear-inducing cake. This case study will be looking at the underwater worlds in Sonic, which have evolved throughout the many iterations and releases of the series. Sega is obligated to ruin my sleep schedule at least once per game, but they do me the courtesy of switching up the soundtrack. Regardless, it's terrible. There are several videos on the various iterations of Sonic's drowning sequence, which is just bizarre. I primarily use this video for reference. This channel has several other videos in this realm that you can check out. As one might expect, echidnas can't breathe underwater, so these levels are motivated by a timer and an oxygen level. These are accompanied, of course, by a thematic water level soundtrack. The terror started with the early games, Sonic 1 and 2. However, Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2 on the SMS console, Sonic Chaos, and Sonic Triple Trouble all take the normal route of a simple T-5 second countdown, represented by a floating number in the center of the screen and a simple tick mark per second. The SMS gets a little bit fancy as the beeping gets progressively faster at 3 seconds, but the sound itself is pretty on par with each other, a vaguely technical alarm clock beep. Also note that it takes far more than 5 seconds for Sonic to actually drown. The particularly interesting timer for Sonic that I want to talk about, though, first appeared in Sonic the Hedgehog 1 on the Sega Genesis and has been rehashed, in my opinion to its detriment, in most subsequent Sonic games. The transition between regular level music to oxygen depletion alarm is sudden and loud. It can't be ignored. It takes advantage of that increasing pace and pitch phenomenon, but also combines that with additional high-frequency, high-paced notes in the last 2 seconds. The progressively increasing tick marks takes advantage of the evolutionary fear response of things being thrown directly at you. Increasing speed or volume is linked to something approaching, and the convergence of repeated notes leads to some semblance of a resolution. However, this resolution is that of a single drawn-out note, which rarely feels particularly resolved. Coupling this with increasing pitch means that something is coming at you fast, and the anxiety of that upcoming resolution increases until the sound stops altogether. After all, after the notes converge, what direction is left? Our final case study in this video will be looking at a personal favorite of mine, Super Metroid. The Metroid series is known for its escape sequences, and the 1994 Super Metroid set the musical tone which would be followed for years to come. Super Metroid was of note to me as I listened through the series because it was personally the most impactful, but didn't rely on the pace-pitch trope that I had been finding in most other games. This song, named Escape, is a variant of Versus Ridley, which is the primary battle music of the game. The meat of the song is a series of repeated 4 notes, which I'll be referring to as the chorus. The first 2 are the same pitch and held for longer, and the second 2 are much shorter and after. The first 2 notes are the same pitch and held for longer, and the second 2 are much shorter and alter in pitch. This chorus is broken up by 2 quieter and melodic bridges that slowly build up the volume, which builds up tension. Each subsequent chorus is the same volume and pitch, but the growth of the bridges artificially inflates the volume and the tension, which is repeatedly built up but never resolved. The variant is created by removing percussion and layering a wailing alarm. My dad and my brother are both drummers, and they think that the percussion is a hi-hat of some sort, or at least the synthesizer's attempt at one. It's a fast-paced series of notes that keeps pace with, if not harmonizing with, the main 4-note phrase. It initially dampened the tone. It added more texture and depth to what was a pretty jarring and repetitive meter. Already the game's music serves to build tension and keep you moving, but adding a cloister bell and removing the soft, low-volume percussion makes it even more impactful. It also utilizes a 5-beat meter, which are typically used to create an off-kilter atmosphere. The primary distinction that I find with this musical timer is that some of the sound here is diegetic, meaning it is part of the game's world and heard by the characters in the narrative. The music from vs. Ridley is clearly non-diegetic, to the benefit of the player, but the alarms are diegetic elements as part of the narrative. The sound is imposed not by the developer trying to entertain and motivate the user, though I'm sure that was a consideration, but by the narrative. We are under a time constraint because we are escaping from a bomb which could surely kill us. The alarm is indicating, in-universe, that the place is about to blow, and in-universe, and our universe, fire alarms don't get progressively louder to scare people out of their beds. There's no one way to sound design, or there'd be a lot of people out of jobs. The music itself is a technical solution to a larger how question. How do we engage people? How do we make this interesting? How do we motivate our users? I found 3 key musical elements that game creators have been using in their sound design to do this. We have high pitch and deep baritones, fluctuating pace, and consistent and predictable rhythm and noteworthy interruptions. But larger than these hows is a why. Why should we care? Why bother watching this video? Why bother having made it? There are a million subjective answers to that, but my answer, my motivation for asking all these how questions, is that people like being engaged, being entertained, and being part of a story being told. We want to feel something. Video games are a wonderful medium for dynamic engagement, and music is an incredibly old form of artistic expression and communication to a deeper extent. It's evolved endlessly, but a core component of music, or really any form of art, is reflecting on and evoking emotion. A video game narrative can be enough to knock my socks off emotionally, but it is the successful combination of disparate elements such as the soundtrack, the gameplay, the narrative, the dialogue, all of these different elements that come together to create a cohesive story, to make me feel something. Music is just one way of doing that, and honestly, I think they're doing a pretty good job. Clearly, I'm pretty motivated since I dedicated 10 weeks of my life to this project. If nothing else, I hope this video made you think. Thanks for watching.